Hello, everyone. Today is a really cool and special day. Today is the feast day of Saint Mary Magdalene. I know all of y'all have heard of her. She's a very popular saint, both for her biblical record and also for a lot of the fun legends and tales that have surrounded her throughout history. And also, just as a random little fun tidbit, St. Mary Magdalene, her feast day is also my wife and I's anniversary, so we were married on her feast day. So in a sense, she's the patron saint of our marriage, which is kind of cool. It makes it easy for me to remember. I've got two days on the same date, so neat little coincidence. But we'll talk about St. Mary Magdalene today. Now, St. Mary Magdalene appears in a few places in the Bible. One of the problems in talking about her is that there are a lot of Marys in the Bible. Mary was a very popular name around the time of Jesus, so there are a lot of Marys. And sometimes she gets confused for other Marys. Now, this happened decently early on in church history, and then she was also confused with the woman who anointed Jesus' feet, or the gospel text says was a sinner. Now, does not say what kind of sinner she was, and so by the time Pope Gregory comes around, so 500s AD, he preaches that all these Marys were basically the same, and he conflates them into Mary Magdalene, and then he conflates them into her giving ointment on Jesus' feet, and then says that it was because she was a prostitute. And so this idea that St. Mary Magdalene was a prostitute is a really, really late idea. The Bible never says that. It's not in any other parts of church tradition. There's church tradition that doesn't mention that at all. But it is one of the major things. But not true. She's probably not a prostitute. But you will find places named after St. Mary Magdalene in the Middle Ages that are places to reform prostitutes. So that's where that came from. But she was not a prostitute. There's nothing in the Bible that says that. But there are a lot of Marys in the Bible, so we have to be careful. But Mary Magdalene does appear in a few places. One really important place, actually, that Matthew, Mark, and Luke all record is that Mary Magdalene was one of a small select group of women that followed Jesus and supported him in his ministry out of their resources. So Jesus traveled around, traveling itinerant preacher. You have to eat, you need lodging, you need, to survive. And his disciples did as well. Well, they needed financial support. So very early on, at the time of Jesus is getting financial support from people around him and his followers. And Mary Magdalene is one of his primary supporters. So maybe she was wealthy. She may not have been fabulously wealthy. Now, later legends will make her fabulously wealthy, actually. We don't know. Mary Magdalene, her last name, right? Last name's a little bit anachronistic, but Magdalene, from the city of Magdala. The city of Magdala is a small fishing village town on the Sea of Galilee. So we don't know. She was not maybe fabulously wealthy, but she had some resources. And she's never mentioned as having a husband, and several other women are. So she could have been single and wealthy, and she believed in the message of Jesus, so she supported Jesus and followed him. She was a primary supporter of Jesus very early on. The next time that Mary Magdalene appears, largely speaking, and remember that there are a lot of Marys in the Bible, so a lot of the other Marys aren't necessarily her. We have her. She's also mentioned as a person to whom Jesus cast out 7 demons. So Jesus healed her, all right, and restored her. And perhaps she started following him in Thanksgiving and supporting his ministry in Thanksgiving for that. We're not entirely sure. But Jesus helped her spiritually in a very, very important and profound way. And then she followed and supported him and became a primary supporter. She's also mentioned, you see, when Jesus dies at the cross. She's one of the few women that's there. So she's a close friend and confidant, perhaps, and supporter to Jesus. She's mentioned alongside, we have the mention of all the apostles, and Mary Magdalene appears a lot in that same context, comparatively. Obviously, the other apostles are the primary focus in the Gospels. They're written a lot about them, but she appears a lot as well, and she's there at the crucifixion. Later, she appears at the tomb. This is important. By the 12th century, she is called the Apostle to the Apostles. That's a cool title, the Apostle to the Apostles. Why? Because apostle means sent one, someone who's sent to give a message. And so we have the 12 apostles, obviously, who go into the whole world to bring the message of Jesus. But according to the Gospels, the person that told the apostles that Jesus had risen from the dead was Mary Magdalene. So she was the messenger to all the messengers. She encountered the risen Lord first. In one of the texts, she thinks that he's the gardener, and Jesus says, nope, this really is me. She goes to the tomb very distraught, very upset about the death of her Lord, right, about Jesus. As obviously someone she followed very closely and believed in, and now he's dead, and she takes care of his body. And then suddenly he's risen from the dead. The tomb is empty. The Gospels actually record that she went to go tell the apostles, and the apostles believed, quote, it was an idle tale. Now, what's this woman doing telling us this crazy tale of this guy coming back? No. We followed him, and what is this wild woman and her tales doing? And they were kind of dismissive of her. Of course, she ended up being right. So yeah, when Mary Magdalene tells you what she saw, you believe what she saw because she told you. So there we go. You want to believe women? Here we are. Believe Mary Magdalene saw the tomb. She knew what was going on there, right? She told the apostles dismissed her, and they were wrong. So Mary Magdalene, the apostle to the apostles, one of the witnesses to Jesus' resurrection. Now, after that, we get legends and we get folk tales, and some of them you may have heard, like the idea that Mary became Jesus' wife. There's no indication for that at all. She was obviously a very close supporter of Jesus, and she followed Jesus. She was there at the crucifixion and the resurrection. But there's no indication there was anything romantic in that at all. And it would not have been sinful for Jesus to have been married. There's nothing sinful about marriage or romance in any shape or form. Most Jewish men were married. That would not have been a cultural problem. I think there are reasons for it. One of them is that Jesus is the Messiah. Messiah means anointed one, which means king, which means son of David. He inherits the throne of David. He's supposed to be the last of the line. If they had got married and had a kid, then those kids would also be messiahs, inheritors of that line. And that not the point. The point of Jesus coming to earth was to be the Messiah and then to rise again, and eventually, we've got the gospel, salvation from sin, and a new creation in the future. We've got all that. So, and there's no other indication that is true. She does appear a lot in some later writings that are considered apocryphal, are considered to be non-canonical. They're not part of our scriptures. One of them is the Gospel of Thomas. And the Gospel of Thomas gets drug out from time to time when people want to imagine that it is more, enlightened or something than the regular Gospels. And if you're one of those and you're thinking, the Gospel of Thomas presents a much better view of Mary Magdalene and women and all this, let me read you a piece from the Gospel of Thomas. Simon, this is the end of the Gospel of Thomas. Simon Peter said to them, "Let Mary leave us, because women are not worthy of life." Jesus said, "Look, I shall lead her so that I will make her male, in order that she may also become a living spirit, resembling you males. For every woman who makes herself male will enter the kingdom of heaven." So there's the Gospel of Thomas for you. Let's be thankful that it's not part of the Bible, right? Or all of you women would have to become men to be saved. That's apparently what the Gospel of Thomas says. So no, Mary Magdalene doesn't come out any better necessarily in the Gospel of Thomas, honestly. But she's an important follower of Jesus. Some other legends develop. Now, one of them In the later medieval era, we have something called the Golden Legend. And the Golden Legend is a hagiography, holy writings about the saints. So there are lots of saints' tales of various sorts. And a lot of them have some wild miracles that put some of the Gospels to shame. But in that one, she is said to have ended up in southern France. There's where some of the modern Mary Magdalene folktale kind of legends come from in France, right? So there's that testimony in southern France, and maybe, I mean, there's nothing necessarily that would discredit the idea that she didn't end up in what we now call southern France, obviously not France at the time, in a place called Marseille. And another testimony in the Golden Legend says that Aix, I'm probably mispronouncing that, it's just A-I-X, it's Aix in Provence. My French is not good. That is not to be confused with Aachen or Aix-la-Chapelle, which was the capital of Charlemagne later in the 800s. Little fun fact, Charlemagne was crowned emperor on Christmas Day, 800 AD. It's an easy date to remember. So, but unrelated to this. So one of the stories is that she ends up in southern France. While she's there, the legends say there's a whole great story in there about converting a king to Jesus, and she preaches there. She's said to have to preach and to teach, and she preaches the gospel to all these people. In fact, one part in the hagiography mentions her preaching again, and mentions that she has disciples. So she seems to gather, just like the apostles, right? So there are certain apostles that followed Peter or followed, Andrew. Obviously, Peter and Andrew following Jesus, right? It's a chain. Okay, disciples making disciples. Apparently, she was a disciple of Jesus, and she made disciples according to the hagiography in the Golden Legend. Now, it's in the Golden Legend, so you're welcome to take it or leave it, but it's interesting that it is in there. Also in the Golden Legend, there's a legend that she eventually did marry St. John the Apostle before he was exiled to Patmos. So, again, maybe we don't know. There's no other indication that besides the Golden Legend. The Golden Legend is pretty late. It's fun to read, but take a lot of it with a big, table of salt, right? Big, I'd use a pound of salt for the Golden Legend probably, but it's a great story, and you never know. Maybe some of those threads there. Maybe she did end up in southern France. Maybe she did marry St. John. If she was there with Jesus' resurrection, there's no reason to think she didn't preach Jesus and teach Jesus where she was. Maybe she did gather some disciples around her. So, but we don't know. She mostly gets lost to history after the Gospels. We've got these legends and tales. There's some later Gnostic Gospels that much later after the fact, although earlier than the Golden Legend, but after the fact, make her a little bit more important, like the Gospel of Thomas, so sometimes they're a little iffy, but she appears in a few other places. But the big thing about her, the main focus in the Bible, is her support of Jesus financially, her healing that she experienced from Jesus, her testimony of seeing the crucifixion, and then her testimony of the resurrection. And remember, the apostles are called apostles, but primarily, and the book of Acts says this specifically, because they witnessed Jesus' resurrection, and she was the first one to do so. So, the apostle to the apostles who gave the testimony about the resurrection of Jesus and about his crucifixion and everything. I imagine that she was one of the people that St. Luke talked to when he wrote his gospel. St. Luke says he went to sources and he talked to people. Mary Magdalene's a big part of the Gospel of Luke, so probably he talked to her and got her side of things and heard what all happened. So anyway, there you are. That's St. Mary Magdalene, the apostle to the apostles, the witness to the resurrection, who was a supporter of Jesus, and today is her feast day. So happy St. Mary Magdalene Day. I hope you found this useful. If you have any other questions about her, please put them below and I'll try to answer them. And look up her prayer in the Book of Common Prayer today. She's a major saint in our church. And make sure you prayed that prayer for the daily office. Make sure you didn't forget about her today. So, all right, have a great day. God bless.